Take away that dimension, and we lose the ability to do this. So in short, data types really count. Proper lengths do in fact matter. Constraints are vitally important, not just for data integrity. When you start talking about constraints, a lot of data warehousing experts will leave the room because they assume that discussion does not include them. We get clean data into our data warehouse. We don't have inserts, updates, and deletes taking place. We control all the data loading process. We don't need any constraints. The data warehouse needs constraints for a performance perspective. The transactional system needs data integrity constraints to protect the data. I see a lot of people trying to put the data integrity constraints into a middle tier application. That's the wrong place to put it. When I first started development, I worked on a mainframe. I had a 3278 green screen. We used CICS transactions to access vSAM and IMS and other hierarchical data stores. We put all of our security and integrity constraints and everything else like that in our applications. Guess what happened when this internet thing came along? Everybody wanted to interact with our back-end databases, but they couldn't because we had everything wrapped up in those CICS transactions. So when the internet first started coming out in the 1990s to the beginning of 2000, a very popular software item was a 3278 terminal emulator. You'd go into the web screen and you thought you were interacting with a new age database, but what you were really doing was pretending to tab around in a green screen and hit the F7 key to submit that transaction up to a mainframe someplace because they could not repurpose that data. Everything was tied up in those transactions. So what did we do to advance the state of the art? We took the rules from a CICS transaction and we now put them into our Java classes and whatnot. So that 10 years from now, somebody's going to be cursing us again for hiding everything in that legacy language, Java, using those legacy technologies, you know, SOA and everything else like that. Because if you've watched technology for a little while, you know, objects have come, objects have gone, different ways of doing things. Corba, IDL was really popular in the 90s. Now it's Java and J2EE. In a couple of years, it's going to be something else again. Putting the constraints as close to the data as possible, it's going to make it so you can repurpose that stuff more and more. The metadata matters. Simple little things like your data types. Give them some serious thought. The optimizer can look at a number 5, and it knows that a number 5 can't contain the value 9,000,000,001. I mean, that's just too big to fit inside of a number 5. So it gives the optimizer more information about ranges of data, the sizes of data. It makes the client application more efficient, more easy to write, use less memory. For example, that array fetch example that I had. The data type itself, use a date to store a date. Use a number to store a number, and use a string to store a string. Anytime you use a string in a generic way to store numbers and dates, you're going to end up with garbage. You're going to end up with queries that sometimes work and sometimes don't, depending on how the optimizer decided to evaluate your where clause that day. So all of these things, give them some serious thought. Just don't pump out that data model without thinking about the data integrity constraints. Remember, we use them for more than just protecting the data. Question authority. Ask questions. I don't have the translator earpiece, but if any hands go up, I will get one, and I'll take some questions. Are there any questions? That either means I said nothing anyone understood, which that's a given. Hopefully the translator made it understandable. Or I was so clear that there is nothing left to discuss. But in any case, I'll stay up here for a couple of minutes for anyone who's too shy to ask questions in a large group. And I just finished a couple minutes early. Again, that's twice in a row, and that never happens. And I think it's because she asked me to speak slowly and clearly, And so I've been trimming down the amount of words that I usually use. But I'll see you again in about an hour and a half for the close-up session. That one will take longer than an hour, so I'm going to be talking really fast. That's just your fair warning back there in the cube. But we'll be talking about 11G, okay? So I'll see you in a bit.